Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. You are looking at the Bobbin 3100, or you could be looking at it if I lowered the camera just enough so you could see. What I wanted to do, I wanted to continue this series I've been making on what is basically learning a machine you've never seen before. You've just gotten it, you don't know if it runs, you don't even know if all of its parts are there, but in this case, someone handed me this machine, and I wanted to show you, bobbin winding, right? How do you wind a bobbin on a machine like this? So let's sort of pan out here and we'll take a look. Now, the top thread, which I have demonstrated in a different video on how I threaded the machine, when you don't know how a machine is threaded, you basically use your past experience with sewing machines, if you have it, and you follow along the thread guides, right? And if you miss one or you thread it incorrectly, you will not get very good stitches. And I am fortunate that the stitches that this machine has produced are very nice. What does that tell me? It tells me the machine is happy. Missing a thread guide or misthreading a machine will either cause poor stitches, bad tension, it could be over loose, over tight, or it can even break your thread if it's very tight. So that's one of the ways an analog machine will speak to you and let you know. Our ancestors didn't have, software and codes and beeping that telling us that something was wrong. They learned their machines. And that's what I'm attempting to do here. I don't have a manual. And again, this series has been about what do you do when you don't have the manual and you're trying to figure a machine out. So I have the purple top sewing thread. I had it on this spool pin, but I've actually moved it over to the second one. There are two pins because I believe this machine, like many of its era, were set up for double needle stitching. So now I have white thread, and I'm going to put that on the left side spool pin just to make things easier so I don't have to get my thread to go around this purple spool of thread. Now, I don't know if any of you remember, but when I was threading the machine with the purple thread, remember I came through this hole here, which is a thread guide, and I did not use this little wheel. The fact that these both are here tells me that one of them should be used for top thread and the other should be used for the bobbin. And I don't know, it could be that the purple thread could have gone around this little wheel guide or not. Maybe it would have still sewn just fine, but I think I have it right. So if that's the case, should the bobbin thread also go through the same hole here? Because we know, based on past experience, and you can see this in other videos, because the bobbin winder, by this point in sewing machine history, bobbin winders almost, I'm sure there are exceptions, some of the Europeans had them down low on the right side, but many machines had moved the bobbin winder to the top. So the thread needs to be given some tension. It's going to come this way. We don't have any thread guides here. And then it needs to come back to the bobbin. Now, how many turns does it make? I don't know. Does it come here and then come over here and share another thread guide? Not sure. But just as with the stitches that you see that were made below, if the machine doesn't like it, it's not going to thread the bobbin properly, or it's going to break the thread, or who knows what else will happen. So let's try, right? Here goes nothing, as they say. So I'm going to take the white thread. I'm coming to the left. I'm going to come around this little wheel. I call it it's a thread guide, right? But it looks like a little wheel, and it does kind of move, allows the thread to come. And so what I've done is I've created what is essentially a pretty tall triangle. Let's see if I can get this a little higher. So now you see I've created a fairly narrow triangle here. Would probably show up better with purple thread. Hopefully you can see this. Now, what do we have? We need to get our bobbin. Now the bobbin, one of the bobbins that came with this machine, and I don't know why, was this. This is a wonderful vintage bobbin. I know because it is mostly solid except for one opening on either side. I know that this is from an earlier period in machine history. Wonderful bobbin. It is size 15 class. It will work on this machine, but it's going to be more difficult to thread when you're winding the bobbin. Why is that? I have shown in older machines when the bobbin winder was vertical and on the front, of course, you would take the thread from the inside and go out that one hole opening, and you were in business. Well, when you take a bobbin and you put it horizontally, it gets a lot more wonky and weird to try to thread the bobbin. So, if you look closely at the at this shaft, we'll zoom in for you here. Get us back here. Do you see on the left side, you will see my little screwdriver I can point with here. You're going to see what looks like a little extrusion. It's actually a spring, and you can see I can push it in. When I put my bobbin, and I have another class 15 bobbin that is more common from this period, and you'll see. Let me hold it still for you. At 12 o'clock, you'll see a little opening there. That opening needs to line up with that spring. And if you've ever tried to put a bobbin on a shaft like this and it didn't work for you, it's because you're trying to push. It's because it's not lined up. It needs that opening. So I'm going to put the bobbin in just like that. Now, we need to thread the bobbin. And just like with the older designs, we're going to be starting from the inside of the bobbin and working our way out one of those holes. Not from the outside in. You want to go from the inside out. Now, when the bobbin is vertical, that's not too big a deal. Horizontally, you may discover that, wow, this is kind of an awkward thing to try to do because you're trying to get the thread. You got plenty of these holes here, but, how do you get the thread to turn? You're inside the hub of the bobbin. Okay, that's great. But now I need to get it to come out one of these holes. Not as simple as it sounds. You can try, bending thread is not something that's easy. It never really curls when you want it to. So, you can see me here. I'm trying to do it. I might get lucky. There we go. I got lucky. If that doesn't work for you, and it might not, one thing you can do is simply take the bobbin off, right? And take your thread on the inside hub of the bobbin, go out one of the holes, and then put it back on. And that might help you, okay? In fact, let me demonstrate that because someone will probably say, hey, well, how do you do that? Okay, so just take the bobbin and again, just pretend you're on a vertical bobbin winder. Start from the inside hub. And this, as you can see, that was much faster. And there we go. Now, what are we doing? I still need to get the bobbin on the hub and I still need to line it up. That's not a big deal. Just make sure that your thread is long enough. It's not going to slip out. You're going to have to start over. Okay, so now we've threaded the bobbin. Don't worry about the hanging thread. We'll deal with that in a minute. So now at 12 o'clock, I have that little opening. I want to line it up with the spring. Be easier for you to see it in from the side, right? And because the bobbin went down, now we're there. Okay, now what I want you to think about here is I want you to imagine, just like you often do with a vintage machine, I don't know about the new machines, but it's a good idea to hold your thread tails when you're getting something started. Okay, you don't want the thread tail to get sucked out of the bobbin, which could happen. So what are we going to do here? I'm going to let go of the thread for just a moment, and now I'm going to push the shaft of the bobbin winder this way. Now I have engaged the rubber winder tire, which you can't see, it's underneath, with the hand wheel, and that's what's going to drive this to get our winding going. Now, what I suggest we do here is the same thing I've shown you all with the older bobbin winders vertical. Before you start pressing the gas and winding the bobbin, just do it manually. I'm just turning the hand wheel, you can see on the right there, okay? And notice that you can see the thread tail is trying to wrap around this, but what am I doing? I'm actually starting to wind the thread around the inside of the bobbin. And all I need is a couple of, you can see I'm just sort of carrying the thread tail as the bobbin spins around to go with it, so I don't want it to tangle up here on the top. So let's lower our camera view and you will hopefully see what I'm seeing. All right. If you look closely, see if that's going to show up for you. I tilt the machine back. Can any of you see that? You can see some white thread, I believe. I'll zoom in for you. I'm going to shift my angles here. There we go. You can see some of the white thread already getting wrapped around the bobbin. That should be good. If you don't have it wrapped enough, it might slip on you, but at this point I'm willing to say, okay, I think we're good to go. So now I'm going to trim my thread tail off the bobbin, because if you don't trim your thread tail can start getting tangled and create all sorts of issues that you really probably preferred not to have. All right, so now get my foot pedal or my foot speed controller plugged in, and we will see if all of my assumptions are correct. Again, for those of you who may be newer to sewing, or maybe you've never had a vintage machine, maybe you've never had a vintage device, you've only had digital technology in any of your devices, nothing wrong with that. Just know that you might be looking at this thing, well, why isn't it giving me feedback? It is going to give us feedback one way or the other. It's either going to work really well or it's not. And then if it's not, we have to investigate why. Okay, so I have now, I've got my thread. Let's back out a little bit here. So now I've got my thread. You can see the white thread spool in the back turning, and now I've got even more. Just manually wind your bobbin just enough that you feel comfortable. I'm not worried that thread's going to slip off now. And so now I'm going to give it a little bit of speed, not a lot. Do not floor this when you especially the first time you're doing something like this. You never want super high speed on a bobbin anyway. So let's see what it does. That's slow speed. You can see the thread feeding. I'm going to zoom in again so you can get a nice close-up view of the bobbin doing its thing. Hopefully that'll show you. And that's slow, right? Now bobbins should feed so that the thread covers the entire bobbin. I'm going to stop it and lower this once more. I want you to be able to see the entire shaft of the bobbin. Now this is not a perfect process, okay? It doesn't always balance the bobbin perfectly, and I'm not sure why. Now one thing I'm noticing is this bobbin is a little bit wobbly. I don't know if that's due to the tire that it's attached to or the bobbin itself. I've made videos in the past on a warped bobbin being a cause of a lot of misery, and you can solve that simply by replacing the bobbin. Okay, so I can increase the speed just a little bit, and that's medium speed. I don't need to go any faster than this. I really do not. Now, I'm going to stop for just a moment. I'm going to show you something. Notice this little chrome, looks like I don't even know what you'd call it. I know what its purpose is. I don't know what its name is. It is a piece of shiny chromed steel, and notice what it lines up with. It lines up with the center of the bobbin. When this bobbin gets to a certain thickness, which should be less than the maximum of which this rim can hold, it should stop. It actually should trigger a spring that will make the bobbin tire move away from the hand wheel and stop it automatically. This was done to prevent, the intention anyway, was to prevent overwinding a bobbin. If you overwind a bobbin and it gets too full or gets fuller than what it can carry, it will cause problems when you're trying to sew. All right, we'll go back and get back to doing it. Do not floor your speed when you're doing this. Winding a bobbin too quickly can create situations where the thread is too tight on the bobbin and it can impact your stitches. Some of you may be able to wind a bobbin a million miles an hour and get away with it. And if you can, good for you. But I'm just laying it out there as an example of one of the many things that can cause a machine not to sew properly. And you might think, oh no, my machine has problems, but usually it can be something fairly simple. Now, keep watching the width of the thread that's being loaded and the width or the edge of the rim of the bobbin. Because on the bottom, it's, whoops, just as I slowed down, I lost the tension. I lost the thread came off of this guide here, so I'm just going to put it back as it was. Make sure my thread is not tangled. Thread has twist to it, and it can curl around all kinds of areas, and you won't even know until there's an issue. All right, let's go back to our bobbin. Now, aha, I sense a problem here. I don't know if any of you do, but I'm going to move the shaft over here and look at that. Did you see that? Now, is this something that can happen to any machine? Yes. Does it mean I misthreaded the machine? Maybe or maybe not. It could just be that the thread got squirrely and it got wrapped around there. I managed to untangle it, thankfully. So I'm going to probably just wrap the slack of the thread and let's get it back to where we have thread tension, and we'll put it back. Now, the thread is, you'll notice again, it's not winding perfectly balanced on the bobbin. This is pretty common. And it's not clear to me why that happens. If there's something that should be aligned differently, it could be the bobbin itself. So now, look what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the bobbin and I'm going to turn it. This is not something I've ever done before, but I thought, well, why not? And I'm going to put it back on the shaft, and let's see how much more thread we can get on it. Oh, it's waiting for me. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I can tell that the bobbin is wanting to stop, and the reason I say that is because it's engaged now, right? And notice it's not turning very much at all. I can even get rid of some of the slack and the tension there. And when I apply it doesn't really want to wind anymore. And that tells me, let's turn back here and I'll show you why. This piece is telling the machine, hey, don't wind anymore, because it thinks the bobbin is full. And you know what? The bobbin is mostly full, but not in an even way. This should be okay. I have used bobbins like this in the bobbin cases of machines, and that did not cause an issue as long as, again, you don't want notice that the thread, set this down instead of holding it and floating in space here. Notice that the thread is still inside the rim, so it should be fine. It should not be an issue. I have noticed over the years that vintage machines, and for those of you who have new machines, maybe you have a different experience, but for people who have vintage machines, the bobbin winders work. They were designed to work, and they do. They're not the most exact devices ever put on a sewing machine. Where's my bobbin? There we go. Okay, so I've basically gotten my bobbin and my thread off, and I'll just cut the, oops, I'll cut cut the thread there. So what have we learned? I think, notice I'm not sure, but I think that that I used what I was supposed to use for the bobbin. Now, could it be different? Could it in fact be a situation? I'm trying to get tangles. It's just the nature of the beast. And then what we've learned is I think using this thread guide here was the correct one. Now, what if you're not sure? Well, the next time I wind a bobbin, I could simply, I could remove this or even just set it aside, and I can thread my bobbin thread through this hole and then bring it over and see if that makes a difference. It might or might not. Some of this, especially when you're trying to figure out threading, is a trial and error exercise. And it's okay. You typically are not going to harm a vintage machine doing this. You just may end up creating strange things until you figure out which way it should be threaded. So don't be afraid to try that. I know it's not, it would be great in a perfect world if you had a manual for every machine, but if you don't give up. Don't say no to a machine, at least try it. And maybe you have a friend or who knows how it's supposed to be threaded. Maybe they have one similar, maybe they just have good instincts for it. And if not, you could always take it to a sewing shop. They typically, if you have one, there aren't too many left, or look at the vacuum cleaner dealers, because for reasons that are not clear to me, they sometimes also have people who work on sewing machines. You'll often hear them described as vac sew businesses, VAC-SEW. I don't know why. But there you go. That is the threading of the bobbin of the Bomark 3100, or at least as I have discovered it. If you have a Bomark 3100, or if you know of a better way to wind this bobbin, do not be shy. Put your comments there down below, and we will see what else we can find out about the Hudson's Bay Bomark 3100 of circa 1978, 79-ish or so. See you all later.